From London, I'm Rochelle Travers, and this is The Standard. The UK Defence Secretary John Healey has told his Israeli counterpart that the British government is following the law with its decision to suspend around 30 arms export licences over the Gaza conflict. Here's Mr Healey speaking earlier on BBC Breakfast.
These are the parts for equipment which are being used in Gaza, in the conflict, for offensive purposes. And the vast majority of other components or parts or items that this country exports to Israel are either not related to the conflict or may be used for Israel's defence.
The controversial move has received some international backlash, partly due to its timing. The announcement came the same day that funerals were held for some of the 6 Israeli hostages that had been found dead in Gaza over the weekend. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called Britain's decision shameful and misguided. The UK government says that humanitarian concerns and the treatment of detainees were among the reasons why they had suspended some arms sales to Israel, amid concerns a clear risk exists that they could be used to breach international humanitarian law. Here to discuss this in more detail is Nicholas Cecil, The Standard's political editor. Nick, why has the UK government made this decision now then?
Well, Defence Secretary John Healey has been stressing that the new Labour government ordered a review into whether Israel was in compliance with international humanitarian law over its conduct in Gaza, and that this is a conclusion. And he was very much stressing that this was a question of law, so that he was trying to take the politics out of it. So in Britain, these issues are assessed under very specific criteria. So in Whitehall, it's called the Strategic Export Licensing Criteria. And this looks at 3 categories. So it is humanitarian provision and access of aid. Second one is the treatment of detainees. And the third is the conduct of the military campaign. So what Foreign Secretary David Lammy announced yesterday was that for 2 of these categories, the aid category and the treatment of detainees category, that there was a clear risk that equipment exported from Britain might be used to commit or facilitate a serious violation of international humanitarian law. So what is particularly interesting here is, was there any politics involved in this? And the government are quite strongly trying to point away from any politics involved. Some Labour MPs believe there should have been a complete ban on arms exports to Israel. So there were around 30 items were announced yesterday. These cover spares for aircraft like fighter jets and drones. But this was about 30 out of 350. So it's only about 1 in 10. And some Conservative MPs have suggested that this move was to appease Labour MPs who are pushing for a full ban. What was quite interesting was that Lord Haig, himself a former Foreign Secretary, gave an interesting insight into how these decisions are made. And he explained that when civil servants present this evidence to ministers, that they normally give a range of options. So they don't just say, Minister, you've got to do this one thing. This is basically effectual instructions. Instead, what they do, they say, here are 1, 2, 3 options, probably 2, 3, or even 4 options. And these are the various decisions you can take. And then it's for the minister to decide what to do. Now, obviously, as soon as a minister gets involved, politics gets involved. So no matter what the government say, they may very well have been following the rule of law as it is in Britain, but there will be an element, it may only be a very small element of politics involved.
Given the UK has made this decision, could we see other allies potentially following suit with similar moves?
Yes, that is possible. And certainly now there's a clear rift between Britain and America on this policy. That doesn't mean that the Washington administration is not putting a lot of pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu at the moment. Joe Biden yesterday was stressing that he doesn't believe that the Israeli Prime Minister has done enough to reach a deal to bring the hostages home. But in terms of the impact this will have on Israel, I suspect it'll be very limited. Britain, obviously, if America makes a decision, that has more impact on Israel, but even that is quite limited in these circumstances. So the British decision, although it will annoy Israel, I don't think it'll bring around any significant change in policy. And we had Lord Ricketts, who's a former very senior British diplomat and national security advisor. His view was that part of this decision was to ensure the integrity of the arms export licensing system in Britain. So this is very much a legalistic framework, and certainly given Israel's actions in Gaza, there's a view certainly among some experts that there may be some breaches of international humanitarian law here. And certainly Lord Ricketts was making the point that actually we've got to follow the law in our country, and this is the result. What also happened under the previous Tory administration was that the then Foreign Secretary David Cameron, he looked at this and came to a different conclusion. So he didn't impose any partial ban on arms exports to Israel. But having said that, Lord Cameron was surprisingly critical of Israel for a Conservative cabinet minister. So and I think that may be partly down to the fact that having been Prime Minister, he seemed to have more freedom than some other previous Foreign Secretaries to give his opinion, and often in a slightly more stark way than might have been expected.
We're an ally of Israel. How damaging could this be to that relationship moving forward?
It will certainly do some damage. For example, Tom Tugendhat, the former security minister, he was launching his campaign to be Tory leader to succeed Rishi Sunak this morning. And he was making a point the timing and the decision will put strain on the alliance between Israel and Britain. Ultimately, all decisions in the future will depend on the geopolitical situation at the time. Yes, at the moment, things will be slightly more tense than previously. But looking ahead, these decisions are always taken in an individual country's best interests.
Could this decision potentially have any further repercussions?
One thing to look out for is we've got the Labour conference coming up in Liverpool in a few weeks' time. And I suspect this could be an issue. And this may have influenced David Lammy's decision to some extent. I suspect he would deny it. And actually, it's a decision taken by the Foreign Secretary and the Business Secretary and the government as a whole. But certainly, this is an issue which the Gaza conflict is an issue that many Labour MPs and Labour activists feel very passionately about. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was some form of vote at Labour's annual rally in Liverpool. And the fact that there's been a limited ban on arms exports imposed may help the government diffuse any revolt to a certain extent.
Let's go to the ads. Coming up in part 2, our features journalist Maddy Mussen on whether or not Prince Harry is on his way back into the royal fold.
Look, if Oasis can get back together, he can get back with the royal family. He can make amends with William.
The Standard Podcast will be back in just a moment. Welcome back. The rumour mill has been in overdrive this weekend over a potential plot to reintroduce Prince Harry back into the royal family. Our features journalist Maddy Mussen has been looking into this for The Standard and has been making the case as to why we should welcome him back with open arms. Maddy, where exactly have these Prince Harry return rumours come from?
So the Daily Mail have sources who have said that he is switching PR firms yet again from his American PRs, who he apparently is dissatisfied with, back to, in quotes, old friends. So that means people from England, I think people that perhaps had connections to the royal family and people that used to look after him back when he was still a royal. So everyone's kind of thinking, does that mean, potential image rehabilitation, trying to get back into the good books with the royal family, which is pretty exciting because, obviously they've been in kind of, in quotes, exile in Los Angeles for ages, even though they seem to be having a perfectly good time. It's not really exile.
Do you know whether this could also include Meghan?
I think it's just Harry. Come as a pair. So regardless, he really adores her and respects her. And I think he doesn't want to be allowed back in anywhere that will not allow her. But yeah, just currently the rumours just are talking about him. But yeah, they're a package deal.
Do you think a return could actually happen given everything that's happened so publicly between them and the other royals?
look, if Oasis can get back together, he can get back with the royal family. He can make amends with William. I also think that, I don't know, obviously long-standing family beef does exist, like all across the world, but I do think that this one might die out with time. The royals are good at holding grudges, and they're also really good at, like upkeeping their strange rules that they have. But I think that Harry and William have been through so much, it would be a ridiculous shame for them not to make up. And I think maybe eventually they'll realise that too.
In your article for The Standard, you make the case as to why we should welcome Prince Harry back into the royal fold. Go on then, make your case for our listeners.
He's just fun, man. Like, honestly, it's so dire watching the royal family these days. Like, obviously it's not all their. There's some external things that are deeply sad and like kind of affecting them that they can't control. But honestly, I'm just missing the fun. I'm missing the good vibes of Harry. He was a laugh. He loved the sesh. He liked to have a good time. He was actually one of the ones where genuinely, if you went for a pint with him, you'd probably not have like the worst time of your life, and you'd actually be able to talk to him like a human. I genuinely believe that he is a kind person that is the most like human and normal of them all. Obviously he's a bit LA-ified now, but I still think that, even considering that, he's the most normal. And I just want someone back that is in the royal family that you could reasonably be like, yeah, that's sound, and we just haven't had that in so long. So I want him back. I miss him.
You can read more about these stories and others in the Evening Standard newspaper or on our website, standard.co.uk. And that's it from this episode. This podcast will be back tomorrow at 4 p.m.